Hello, this is Blue Rain Gallery Podcast. I'm Leroy Garcia, your host. Today we're interviewing Roseta Santiago in the release of her new show that opens up this Friday. We have her here to explain a little bit about the imagery that she's produced, maybe some of the inspirations, the historic inspirations, or today's inspirations. Maybe even talk about some of those great models that she uses as well. Roseta, come on in. I also want to let people know you can, we did a podcast with Roseta a few months back, episode 55. So if you go to blueraingallery.com, just scroll to episode 55. Roseta, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you. Thank you for hanging a beautiful show.
It looks beautiful. This show just hung right on. It's one of the more beautiful shows we've ever hung. In fact, at the end of this podcast, I'll have Leah do a panoramic of the viewing here.
Great.
Okay, so let's start with this one. Alice in Anomaly? Alice in
Anomaly.
Anomaly.
An anomaly is something means something different or unusual. So anyway, this is kind of a fairy tale. It's a little different. It's the last piece I brought in. And it's based on a photograph from Denise DeLeo, a photographer, who said, well, would you let me use would you paint my photograph someday? And I said, so I'm surprising her. So this is a girl in it's all very symbolic. Okay, this is Alice and her rabbit, but this is a poem by Neruda, a love story, and it's just things you can imagine. I like to put some clues out to kind of make some intrigue for the viewer.
It's really kind of cross-cultural in some ways.
It is.
Right?
That's where I'm heading. So it's not all Southwestern. I have some purely Southwestern and native paintings, but this one has more of a fusion feel. So that's...
Yeah, I like the reference to the Pueblo culture, the rosary beads.
Right.
And also the unusual with the tattoo. I haven't seen you do a lot of tattoos. So that's pretty cool. It's a beautiful painting.
Thank you.
It's about 64 by 40 inches. So it's a good sized piece.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's walk this way. So we have a trio of little paintings here. This is also, inspired by Pueblo culture.
This is the young man that I met at, I meet people in restaurants. I spot people and I get to meet them. He's from Tesuque Pueblo here, and I just wanted to paint him. He radiated his generational look and his hair tie, so I wanted to paint him.
And that's a pretty common scene with the natives, especially during ceremonies where they tie their hair in that particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. But I like the way you've integrated the floral arrangements as well behind some of these scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's another really unusual piece, kind of similar in a sense that it's unusual like the first one we talked about.
Right.
So tell us the story on this one.
Again, it's it's called Awakening. And it's a model named Cedar, actually. These are all real people that I meet. I was intrigued by her very quiet beauty. It took a year to get her to model, but she's a contemporary, but a Navajo Dene woman. She designs clothing. And so she's kind of in between the generational belief system that I see happening today. The white eagle feather on the top is something that she's tied to, but she also really resonates with this Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Catholic religion. Mm-hmm. So, and the gold leaf I use on a lot of the pieces are really what I use to point out some sacred things, just meaningful things that float around in the air.
What I like about how you're using the gold leaf, it's kind of scattered. And some of the older paintings you have, it's really defined lines and around. It's kind of just, pretty cool.
More contemporary.
Yeah. So these are two great paintings in reference to this large one we're going to talk about. But this is very unusual. Tell us a little bit about that.
This is unusual because about 200 people want this painting, and it was an instant recognition. I was standing outside Blue Rain Gallery photographing a model, and this young lady walked up the street dressed like that, and I was transfixed. And so I ran out in the middle of the street and stopped her, photographed her the next day. And my feeling about it is she was already historical. And then I thought, well, maybe I need to include some more of what would be a contrast to her. And it was the Taos guys walking away. Just the curiosity of what was going on there.
I like it too because it has a monochromatic feel to it, and that's also unusual in your palette. So you're using pretty much more
very
bright colors.
Colorful. I'm experimental.
Yeah, and then this is more another muted type of painting, not so much monochromatic.
Right. This was also, and it's part of this series that we're going to talk about next, where it's a process. I'm trying to capture what happens between me, the brush, and the canvas in between. It's really the thought process. And so I'm pushing myself to catch something before it gets closed, before we call it closed, where there's no room for imagination. So this is one of them.
Yeah, a very beautiful scene.
Thank you.
This is one of my favorites. And it has all the elements that we were talking about, but more on the traditional Roseta side. I think the Santa Fe sign.
Well, and also the models. This was my first model, Tony, and this is my last model, Ty. And what I love about this is a long time ago in high school, when I was just playing with paint and drawing, I used to draw like this. So I had a big flashback and realized that there's something very important about the meaning underneath, the skeleton and the substance underneath a finished painting. And so the reason this pot is floating is because it hasn't really reached the painting yet. So I was trying to illustrate movement.
Yeah, beautiful painting. Well, let's walk over here to this major piece. And this is the masterpiece of all masterpieces.
This was a wonderful experience for me. It's Thai. And I took all of my collection of blankets out and threw them on the floor of my studio and decided I wanted to actually challenge myself again on design and not be very traditional. So this has a lot of movement. The patterns were difficult. They moved around. And so this angle was me on top of a ladder, trying to capture her sleeping and the S-curve of the figure. That's all really anchored with her traditional pots up there on the right.
Very beautiful. I love the perspective that you captured. As mentioned in episode 55, but Roseta is an avid collector of artifacts. So she uses them for reference in all of her paintings, like the Hopi basket up there and the pots and the Navajo weaving.
Right, and the moccasins up in the
I
upper
forget
left,
about the moccasins, yeah.
which is part of another story on this.
We'll get on that one. Oh no, who's this? This is a famous model.
So I had Leroy's daughter, Elena, came over to the studio. We were going to surprise Leroy with this. So we did. Anyway, she came over. She's a wonderful friend and a fabulous model. And so
I'm biased, but she's a very beautiful young lady, as all my daughters are.
Yes.
A good spirit, nice and soft and gentle.
Well, I've painted Leia, and I've now painted Elena.
Yeah, one day you'll have to do Serafina.
I'm ready.
Come on over this way. So when I hung this wall,
It's all about.
I made it. It was the floral arrangement wall.
It's great.
There's an unusual one here, but we'll talk about it. It's just a small one. But tell us your perspective on the floral arrangements.
Well, there's a rain cloud that I painted on her shawl to go with the whole theme of florals. At the time, there were a lot of flowers blooming, and I just wanted to paint something bright and exciting with a lot of energy. And so she has a squash blossom necklace on that I own. And just Ty is a happy person. I've painted so many very quiet, somber is what I've heard. But this was just so much fun. I just painted that
You know,
way.
it kind of occurs. It has almost a Polynesian feel to it as well, even though it's
Right,
Pueblo.
it looks like a Gauguin
Yeah, it does.
painting in the West.
One other thing I would point out, Roseta, from time to time, does Japanese, Chinese
Yeah, they're
symbolism on pottery.
Asian
Yeah,
things.
Asian fusion, we'll call it,
Right.
in a Southwest format. And then these three, particularly the upper middle one. Let's see if Leah can get closer to this.
These paintings specifically are dried flowers on the bottom. I think there's beauty in them. You know, it isn't all, these voluptuous blooms, but I love the shapes, and they're also in some traditional Southwest Pueblo pots.
Mm-hmm.
San Ildefonso and Hopi, I think. Anyway, and one of the very first paintings I did was called Curiosity, and I had that rabbit.
Oh, nice.
And
Is it a porcelain or what?
Huh?
Is it a porcelain?
No, it's part of a very old carnival thing. It's made out of paper mache.
Wow.
And I dropped it when I was trying to get it down, but I glued it together. And the curiosity of it is just so wonderful. And of course, the nest and the egg. So
That's some good thought. I like that.
I like it. And these are different frames too. Even
Yes.
the frames are very textured.
Mhm.
And I fell in love with the frame.
They're very light frames too. They're not as heavy
I
as
know.
they might look. Okay, well, let's start with this, and then we'll talk about the peripheral too.
Okay. This is Jean Braverock, who is a Blackfeet Indian. And he is collecting elders' stories for his tribal language. He's driving an Airstream to Canada and back. And so I had a chance to paint him, and so I did. He's in a couple of major movies. He was the chief in Wonder Woman, and he's out now in That Dirty Black Bag and in Dark Winds. But he's so fascinating because he's very humble, even though he's the baddest guy in the films.
He's pretty tall.
Yeah, he's like 6'5", I think.
He's 6'5". I was like, hi, nice to meet you.
But he supports me and my art, and also is a flute player.
Mhm.
So anyway, I honored him with his work with the tribal language.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and let's move to this one. This, I have not seen you do fancy dancers before.
Well, this guy, I like to honor people who I run into, who are real people. This guy is a guy that was dancing. I saw him on Marcy Street loading his stuff up. I said, hey, get your stuff back out.
Time for a photo.
And where are you? And so he dances on the plaza in Santa Fe, and he's a singular guy telling his story. He's very intense and made a lot of his regalia, and I had to paint him because this is his energy level.
Mm-hmm. You can tell there's a lot of energy. The movement, you've captured it very well. It's a beautiful painting. And then this is another Jean Braverock painting as well, right?
Jean came over, and I just said, I really need to paint something really close and more of an intimate portrait, and that's him.
Mm-hmm.
And I had props, and he brought his props. So a lot of people
collaboration.
like that. Yeah. And I find that I'm honored to have that accessibility. People aren't angry or anything.
Well, you're a fantastic people person, Roseta.
Well,
You connect pretty quickly with most people.
And I'm sincere.
Yeah.
I'm not here to make a bunch of money on his props.
So this is Ty again, and is that Tony?
That is Daryl.
Oh, that's Daryl. Okay.
Daryl from, Daryl from
Grew up with him.
Taos. One of my second model that I ever had, and Ty. And this is more of a graphic experiment. I really like it. The gold leaf I used, like I said, for a sacred kind of an element. Like I did in still life, I used a white cloth. And then this is a portrait of Ty that I just love. It's very straightforward and traditional.
It's crisp but soft at the same time. You really captured that well.
It really captures her attitude.
Mm-hmm. And this is also kind of an unusual piece for you. Chief's headdress.
I love textures. I love to paint textures. And I just have always wanted to paint a full bonnet. So I just went for it.
It came out in a chiaroscuro way along a black background. So it really pops. Very beautiful scene, and captured the feathers very beautifully.
Yeah, and feathers are not easy.
Well, let's walk over here to this last piece.
All right.
Okay, so Roseta, this is also a very unusual piece. You've done this with horses with the black background and kind of white suggestion for it. So tell us about your story on this.
Well, this is a really big story, but it won't be that long. When I decided to become a painter, I was in the Tate Gallery in London and saw a painting called The Lady of Shalott by Waterhouse. It was based on a poem by Tennyson. And the whole thing started my thought process of, I can do that. I decided I could paint that painting, which was really complicated, and I actually did paint it eventually. So that was my goal. And then in my mind, there was this thought of a floating person, maybe me, in a very old canoe. This is the tapestry from that painting, The Lady of Shalott. And there's a cross, and she's floating. There's a little bit of water line. She's floating, and she's lost in thought and in her unknown world of creativity. So it's kind of a self-portrait.
Well, it's very beautiful. I really love it.
Thank you. Cool. I do too. Maybe I'll buy it.
I'd like to thank Roseta for taking time and going over her show with us. As you can see, it's pretty diverse. She put a lot of time and effort and thought into everything that she's showing here. I'd like to encourage you to come this Friday and visit us and visit Roseta. We do have catalogs on the show as well. I'd like to thank everybody for watching our podcast. Please subscribe to them if you haven't through our YouTube platforms or wherever you get podcasts. If you have a hard time doing that, go to blueraingallery.com under the menu bar podcast. Also, I'd like to encourage you to go to our online store where you can find lots of Roseta products, bluerainprintshop.com. Bring art into your everyday life.
Thank you.